dia, paz e bem.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is our second day of the seminar, Brazilian Tragedy. We start wishing you a good morning because even if it's raining and even if we're going through a tragedy, we still wish all good morning, but knowing that we're living through a world tragedy and an even deeper tragedy in Brazil. So this is our second day in our 3-day seminar, Brazilian Tragedy, the Risk for the Common Home. It's a question, but it's also a statement because of the complexity of this question, we need international solidarity. And this seminar is being promoted by a network of organizations, SEGI, CONIC, PH Brazil, the HU Unicinos Institute, and the hashtag Respira Brasil. These are supporters of this initiative, and we were very happy to have a very important debate yesterday, and today we will have 2 discussion rounds that intensified the understanding of this tragedy in Brazil that has created this death machine that articulates temple, market, death, but also resistance. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And to open our seminar, we will ask Flavio to share with us a chant by Thelma Tarepani. And this chant was sung in the ecumenical dialogues promoted by SESI last year. And we will begin our day with this beautiful voice. Welcome everyone who's with us via Zoom or via YouTube. Good morning and a good seminar for us.
Siu-siu-tawa, Morigua, Moré, Siu-siu-tawa, Morigua, Moré, Siu-siu-tawa, Morigua, Moré, Siu-siu-tawa, Morigua, Moré, Wanabom, Wanabom, Morigua, Moré, Wanabom, Wanabom, Morigua, Moré, Siu-siu-tawa, Morigua, Moré, Siu-siu-tawa, Morigua, Moré. O pororo, macuio, mãe tauaru, tauaru. 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 Obrigado.
Thank you.
Obrigado. Nesse espírito,
Thank you. And it is in the spirit of this chant that we begin the session Social and Human Rights, Aggravated Inequalities in our second day of the Brazilian Tragedy a risk to the common home seminar, and we have the privilege this morning of addressing such an important theme and in dialogue with two leaders that are well known in Brazil and outside Brazil because of its work in multiple fronts. We have here with us Professor Benilda Brito. She has a graduate degree in psychology. She has a master in social policy. She is a member of the DESCA platform, a UN consultant, and an INZIGA Black
muito
Women
conhecida na área
Collective
de educação
in
da rede
Amazonas. She's a well-known education activist in the Malala Network, and she will be one of our panelists this morning. She will open our discussion round. She will be followed by Ailton Krenak, an indigenous leader, philosopher, poet, and Brazilian writer. He organized the Alliance for the Flores Peoples, and he is a professor with the University of Juiz de Fora. I will mention a few of his books, and Ideas to Postpone the End of the World is his most recent book. We also have two international guests participating in our discussion. Monsignor Bruno Mario do Fé from the Secretariat for Integral Human Development. He's not with us, but he's not with us right now, but he sent us a message that will be broadcasted by video, and also Christine Janger, who I will introduce when I invite her to respond to our presentation. My name is Raimundo César Barreto. I am a Baptist pastor from Bahia, Brazil. I am a member of the Baptist Alliance in Brazil, which is one of the organizations that is participating in this seminar. And currently, I'm living in Princeton in the United States, where I teach in the Princeton Seminar in the ecumenical and religious history field. And I also represent the network in the US for democracy in Brazil. It's a solidarity network articulated by Brazilians in the United States who are fighting in solidarity with the formal networks in Brazil and in other parts of the world, especially at this moment of pain, of resistance, establishing bridges to make our fight more visible. And we will begin with Professor Benilda. And without further ado, I will give the floor to them. But I also remember that the spirit of yesterday's conversation was reflecting and having many questions about the human rights language and the problems we have with that language. But the fact is, as said by Boaventura de Souza Santos, this is a language that has been globally used, and it is a language through which our conversation about human dignity has taken place, especially internationally. And the question is, who does that language work for, and who are the subjects of rights? And we do not want to use a language that treats, that addresses rights for, but that highlights the subject of rights. So it is within this perspective that we open our session, and I invite Professor Benilda to give her presentation. Well, in the beginning of the world, before the world even existed, Olodumare, who is the greatest deity, he invited all orishas to create Earth, and they decided to create Earth without the participation of women. And of course, that wouldn't work. They tried in several ways. They didn't ask women to participate and tried to create Earth. So nothing worked. And then they looked for strategies and held meetings. On the other hand, women were upset because they wanted to participate and give their contribution. And they called Oshun, who is the mother of fertility, the Orisha of strategy, also known as Yalode. Yalode for the Yoruba people is a leader that represents other women. And Oshun made an agreement with women. If there was no participation of women to create the world, there wouldn't be a world. Since Oshun created fresh water, she wouldn't provide water to the world. So they decided that they would not birth children, that the seas would not have fish, and that the plants would not flower. And the plan of man went wrong, and they went to Olodumare, and Olodumare said, "Did you do everything I said? Did you call Oshun?" And they said, "No, we didn't call her." And he said, "There's no way to do this without her." So they went to Oshun and apologized, and then they understood that in order for the world to be a good place, everyone needs to participate. And then they started smiling and playing around and valuing the different outlooks and the different contributions. And I'm telling this story because I think it's very important to understand where I come from when I'm contributing to this very important seminar. First of all, I am a lesbian feminist woman. I am a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm the grandchild of Ms. Benigna, and I am from Yansan Yushagol, and this is Wednesday, and my mother is from the storms, and it's like the bamboo and which bends but doesn't break, and the butterfly that goes through several metamorphosis processes. And my father is Shango, and he is the god of justice. And talking about all of this and paying respect to the Orishas. But in addition to that, I am a survivor. I'm a woman who has survived racism in Brazil. And I am from a very inclusive community, and this makes us have several conflicts in the common, quote unquote, common house. I come from a people that uses singularity as the model in the relationships. And when we look at a full circle, we don't know when it begins or when it ends. A circle is a sign of equality. And that's why the capoeira circles exist. We don't have division in those places. That's why the samba circles don't have a hierarchy. We are an inclusive people. That's why we don't accept just Black people. And that's why I'm talking about a conception of inclusion that guides our history in this extremely unequal country. And I'm very honored to be here with Ailton Krenak because I'm also from the city of Belo Horizonte, but my grandma and my mom were born in the Serra do Cipó region that houses a quilombo, and My grandma, a Black woman born in 1914, she really empowered me as a Black woman, and she made me develop a value that's very important, which is our ancestrality. And we understood that without our ancestrality, we can't affirm our identity. If the biggest trap in racism the, is the biggest strategy is to affirm our identity. Grandma taught me how to do many things, including liking myself, while racism told me I shouldn't. But she also taught me how to cook rice. And my grandmother, when she was cooking rice, she used to wash the rice and a little bit of the water she saved to wash my face because she said it was good for the skin. But after while she was cooking rice, she did the sign of the cross, and then she did it as a ritual. And I thought, why does she do the sign of the cross? Will the rice multiply since we're so poor and there's so many of us? Or will the rice taste better? My grandma taught me how to join faith and resistance. And that is why my grandma went to the Catholic Church so many times and demanded that I would also be asked to put the crown in Our Lady of Mercy, because at that time, only white people could crown. And in my youth, I really used all of that. And what am I here to say? I'm here to say that being here in the seminar discussing the Brazilian tragedy, ever since the first Black person was brought here, the common home for us are the traditional communities. We never feel in a common home, not even in the religious spaces in Brazil, not even in political instances. The indigenous community and the Quilombola communities are the common home for us, because we learn that everyone's important and we learn a practice of inclusion. And he used to tell me, Benilda, when we discuss democracy, we need to be very radical, because democracy demands inclusion. It demands us to do like we have always done in our traditional community. We need not to have a hierarchy. And how do we discuss democracy in a country that is extremely racist and that used to deny racism with the myth of racial democracy? Democracy is a statement that all of us are human, but being human with racism, who has always turned us into animals. One of the books that I published, I talk about this. This is not bullying, it's racism, because while bullying talks about the characteristics, racism dehumanizes. And in order to know if we have a democracy somewhere, we need to look at the Black people, because Black people in Brazil are the touchstone of democracy, the stone that serves us to evaluate the quality of the diamond. So Professor Fernando used to say, look at the situation of the Black people in this community. Do they have access to water, food, basic sanitation? No, they don't. So we don't have a democracy. So democracy was always a myth for us. That's why it's important to think about this threat. And I'm also moved by two feelings. First of all, I had an immense pleasure to be here with my partners, Romi, Asesio, and the landless movement. And we have just received a donation of rice to a partner institution I'm a member, and this is a partnership, and this is a huge pleasure for us, João Pedro. And on the other hand, I also feel like I have an extreme responsibility to break with many silences, as said by Alder Lodge. We're here to speak, but many times we were not heard. We have the responsibility to speak in the name of other people in another perception that will demand us to break with epistemicide and silence. It is a logic that only legitimates one religion and one truth, and that's why it's dangerous. So I'm here to talk about peoples that have other realities and that have conflicts that do not include us. To us, Black people who live through, who experience Black mixed religions, a soldier and a guardian is our soldiers of peace, Oxóssi and Ogum, who we present with gifts. That's why bullets for us are not bullets that have killed our people. We can't understand Black bullets. We can't understand bullets that kill Black young people in Brazil. And Sunday we will have Mother's Day, and I also wanted to mention the Black mothers and the Black women who have lost their children and who are losing their children with COVID, when violence has only increased in the peripheries, in the favelas, but also in the city, and they have lost their children to what we call structural racism that has been present ever since Brazil was invaded and when Black people were brought here as slaves. And as soon as the abolition of slaves has happened, Princess Isabel and the Brazilian Constitution forbid poor people and beggars to vote. So who are those people? So Brazil never had policies to assist Black people. It legitimates exclusion. These Black mothers have lost their children to institutional racism. So there are several racisms, and institutional racism is fed by individual racism. So we can't only say Brazil is racist. You are racist. And my child came to me one day and said, I am being beat up by a child. And when I asked him why he did that, he said, because they're Black. And what we need to think about when we talk about individual racism is, what are we doing? We need to teach our grandchildren that white grandchildren can spit on Black grandchildren, because racism, in order to sustain itself, it's not a behavior that structural racism is fed by institutional racism. You can't go to the market and purchase racism. Racism is practiced in our daily lives. We also live through environmental racism, which is the great constructions that arrive in our communities in the name of economic development, and they say that's good for everyone. And why is that good for everyone? It's not. It's not pale face. And when I say pale face, and it's a Brazilian expression, and when I say pale face, we say that we don't know, we don't want that economic development. And we are also talking about language. When we began this discussion, we are also going through an educational racism. The people who have access to education and the internet and online learning, and mothers lose their children due to these several forms of racism that are disguised as different things. and what Foucault would call the biopower and the decision of who lives and who dies, but Ashinimeme calls necropolitics. He will say, yes, Foucault, there is biopower, but necropolitics says that they will not kill the body, but they will find ways of surviving. And that's why we're not shocked when Brazil provides people with a financial aid of 200 reais. They can't purchase anything. So that's a way of keeping people alive, but killing them. And it's as if Mãe Beata de Iemanjá would say in Rio de Janeiro, she says that in order to be a mother, the Black woman doesn't have to give birth because the touch, the care, and the love are forms of giving birth. So I'm not talking just about mothers that have actually birthed children, but I'm talking about this collective Black initiative. And so Mãe Beata says that a hand is a birth and a look is a birth. So when a Black young person is killed in a community, it's not just the mother that's affected, the community is affected. And not just the community, the country is affected. And not only that, but it's a feeling of a race. I'm talking about mothers that can't sleep until their children arrive at home. And these are the Black women in the communities. I think that no mother can sleep soundly while her child is not with her, but the Black mother sleeps even less because in addition to human violence, there's the racist violence, because that child will be killed because someone will be sure they were robbing something. And I'm talking about mothers that don't eat because faced with misery and with hunger. These are the women that share what little food they have and they give it to their nieces and to their aunts. I'm talking about Black women that when faced with this pandemic, they are busy surviving. They're busy creating strategies to survive, because where public policy can't reach, we are the ones that make public policy. Everything that we have is us. We are on our own. In my master's, I took the statement of a woman that said, my mother did everything in this community. She cared for people who had lice. She cared for people who were underweight. And when a woman was beat up by her husband, she went to talk to that husband and said, this woman is being beat up, and if it happens again, I will go to the police. And my mother did everything in the community, survival strategies. We need to create it to be alive. And these women use wisdom to survive. And they know that the photos that are in the police stations and that serve as a basis, and the photo of the defendant is our Black children.
Fórum Nacional de Segurança Pública e as nossas próprias vivências, esses suspeitos nos catálogos são jovens, pobres e negros. 83% dos presos injustamente para reconhecimento.
83% of Black people are 83% of the people who have been unfairly arrested are Black people. And who will be taking care of the traumas? Who will be taking care of mental health? Who will pay them back for the days and the hours that they have been arrested? We are saying here that these people will have to carry with them the fact that they're suspects throughout their lives. This is institutional racism. They also know, these Black women, that us Black women, the power of words. A word to the Black people is sacred. The word it weighs a ton because we are a spoken a spoken culture. And the first records and the orality to us has a very fundamental importance. In our Black territories, the spoken word has a very important power, and it's extremely important in our culture.
It's just as if a full library had been burned. One word for us is really important. If you want to create a tab in the market in your street, this should be the same thing as ensuring human rights, the symbology of the word, the motivation of mystic ideology. This should all be present, and it's not there. The Portuguese, it's the Black Portuguese that tells about our difficulties, our identity. How should we interpret derogatory interpretations? What words should we use? The movement of Black women always wanted a positive semantics, which is making efforts to make a positive action in arts and music. That's what is called Afrographies, because our language, our body, our identity all speaks for themselves. I have earrings that are from Shango. This is our identity. This is our word. Us, Black women, know that the investigation process is many times about the subject and not about the fact, the individual and not the fact. Right should be a science that discusses hypotheses and theories that will reach an investigation. But as Professor Gonzalez says, the right does not concern, like, we have to understand that racism is a violation of human rights. So if you ask yourself about where do these people come from, everybody simply considers the Black body a suspect. We know that all the situation has increased violence and inequality in favelas. People who have access to vaccination, people who don't. Even though Brazil is the second country with the largest Black population in the world, the largest part of the population who were vaccinated was not Black. So there is an elephant in the room, and we need to address it. The fact about the stimulus from the government, the problem about SUS, the sanitation genocide that brought over 400,000 deaths, and we are the majority of these deaths. And what we don't understand and don't accept is that after so many years of denouncing and of telling the world about this, our agenda is still the same. The Declaration of Durban in South Africa that reported, that denounced xenophobia and racism is a proof of that. And now we're completing 33 years of the meeting of Black women. And if we look back and see our claims from the time of the Citizen Constitution, if we remove the date from this report, we see the same claims, the same problems. Many things have improved for Black women, but our struggles are very lonely. And when we talk about reproductive health, we went to China as well to talk about this. This convention happened in Beijing. The data improve about home violence, domestic violence, but it's for white women, not Black women. We did a march, the national march of Black women against racism in Brasilia, and we took more than 100,000 women to this march. We were the last movement to go on the streets before the coup that took President Dilma out of the government. We were the first movement to go back to the streets post-coup. We started that in Goiânia with over 1,000 women. And we delivered to the Supreme Court last year a document saying that we can't take our rights being denied to us anymore. And now we have a document that will say that if it's not good for everybody, it's not good for anybody. And the High Commissioner for the UN, Dr. Havina, is supporting the policies against racism. And the said heads of government, they say that the situation does not exist. One of the most cruel faces of racism is negation, is denial. So if we don't have policies for fighting racism, if there is silencing, which is something that the movement has always reported, and we say the death comes before the shot is shot, the bullet is shot. And we don't believe in this idea of a blind justice. We believe in Xangô's justice, the justice that ensures rights. We believe in the Yansan justice that takes the sword and goes to the fight. We believe in our movements because we don't live alone. And just to finish, I'd like to leave this food for thought. And it's a very contemporary thought. We have a philosophy, we have a philosophy of the owl. It's a bird of prey and it leaves its nest to know what is happening. And there's a story of a soldier, a Nazi soldier that was responsible for the deaths of gypsies and homosexuals. And then when this Nazi was called, he was asked, "Why did you kill these people?" The soldier said, "Well, I was just fulfilling orders. I did not kill them." So you had the Fordism in a society that is who's going to take care of the children, who's going to work, who's going to press the button that will kill people. So racism in Brazil is the same thing, my brothers and sisters. The simplest actions have an instrumental reason. It's an empty reason. So it's like a Fordism. So evil starts becoming so small that you don't have responsible people and you don't have accountability. And also, I would like to talk about our guilt and responsibility. How to keep the common home as quilombos? How should we turn homes into quilombos? Thank you so much, Benilda. We're getting so many comments, very strong and timely comments. due to your very challenging speech. One of the greatest problems of moderating a panel is having to interrupt such important speeches. Now we have another very important speech to share with Mr. Krenak. You introduced very well when you said that the Brazilian tragedy did not start right now. I have a quote by Cardinal Michael Zern. He says that the COVID is just like a magnifying glass. It doesn't create anything. It just intensifies. It not only intensifies the issues of human rights, but also reveals the issues of um, moral issues in the world. And I think that your speech is very aligned with that. And now we will hand the floor to Mr. Ailton. We're really anxious to hear them. I'd like to tell you that we have an attendance list. We didn't have one yesterday, it's just today and tomorrow. And I'd like to encourage people who are participating, please leave your questions in the Q&A box. I don't know if we will have time to respond to all of them, but we will take note for our discussion at the end. Ailton, welcome, and you have the floor. Thank you so much, Professor Benilde, for your wonderful and inspiring opportunity. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to my friends that I haven't seen in a while. I'd like to tell you that Paulo Maldus, he actually was fishing for me in the banks of the Doce River. I'm seeing João Pedro. I haven't seen him for a while. And in these little boxes that I'm seeing, I would like to greet everyone, and I'd like to greet your family, Benilde. And today we can sing together, Tá caindo fulô, tá caindo fulô. Wonderful. It's really good to summon our ancestry in such a poetic and loving way, and we don't need to break any plates for that. We can go through these rose fields very smoothly. And it's very timely to talk about the Colombian people today who are being massacred by a criminal, just like the person who's here. Latin America just seems to have fallen into a very bad situation. We're being administered by criminals, and we are suffering from so much misery. And thinking about human rights right now, it's like begging for change, for coins. And it's good that in Latin America nowadays, we still have the courage and the trust that we're going to be capable of changing this long history of subservience of this political class of Latin America that is always on their backs to the people. And everyone, every single one of them. The other day, a young person in the Rio Doce Valley, he said, we want to do something here in Ipatinga. We want to, move the local culture. And then I said, what local culture? You are the problem from the metal working, the steel working. You want to call this beautiful region the steel region. What a very bad taste. Only an imbecile will call someone this the Steel Valley. So Brazil decided they wanted to be the playground of United States, and they started building all of this infrastructure with ports and airports and railways. And we think, well, the Americans have a base in Kuwait and in Japan. No, the Americans have a base, like a headquarter in Brazil. And as I was listening to you, Benilda, 83% of the deaths of COVID in New York were of Black people. So actually, they were indigenous and Afro-American Black people. So they were not white people dying. So death has a color as well. So whenever death goes out to prey, it's just a wild dog. Today here I am wearing Gaudino's t-shirt. Gaudino was burned alive in a curbside as if he was trash, an urban trash. And in this condition, we have approximately 40% of the indigenous peoples. That is, the indigenous people were kicked from their lands and they went to the cities. Now these indigenous people need to claim for a right to be urban. So if you set fire to the common home, you throw someone in the desert, and this person needs to claim for the right to live in the desert, for example. So when you give opportunity to mining and steel, you want people to reconfigure their homes inside this very cruel system. And there is simply no place for indigenous peoples, for Black people. We only have place for homogeneity. And this homogeneity is a byproduct of violence against the so-called common home. And if we think that it goes beyond the ecosystem and the habitat and every social and cultural system that we have based on the earth in our wonderful Mother Earth. And it was really good for you to say, to talk about our transcendental mothers, the mothers that gave sense to our very existence in this planet that we call Mother Earth. So we need to think about these mothers that transcends any other understanding, and we need to have a new kind of thought, which is the right to Earth. It's a scandal to get to the 21st century. We have to look around and say, where's the right to the nature? And the other day I was saying, I am fed up with human rights. We need to add other types of rights in this basket. When you think about the Western frame of mind, that idea that God created the world and put the white people in the world and told white people to lead the world. So you have an ancestral narrative about the creation of the world. We also have other ones, but there is one that he is hegemonic. It has to do with Abraham leaving lands far to colonize the Canaan tribes. They killed everyone there. The ones that were left went to Palestine. And I am very solidary to the Palestinians because they were a tribe that lost. And they went to Palestine, that is a neighbor of Cisjordan, and now they get bombed by the United States. So this is global. And it happens inside the biosphere of this wonderful planet that is Earth. So how are we going to find a way to dance with Mother Earth? Dance with it until everybody gets dizzy. We need to stop thinking that there is one single truth. We need to just stop talking about the truth. The world is full of truth. There's so much truth in the world that justice today is controlled by criminals today. The global justice system is manipulated. So I will not just get it out there, but human rights should be an agreement between peoples and not a state determination. We have a vertical relationship where an impersonal entity determines what rights we have. And it's impossible an agreement among us, the diverse people, where we have a pluriverse where our visions could coexist. We should not have then an hegemonic type of narrative. And every time that we try to establish a truth, we are killing all of the others until one of them will stand with this idea that it's blind. So I was very moved by your speech. As the Yanomami says, you gave a magna class, a master class. I wanted to hear you all morning. I did not want to say anything, and I'd like to greet everybody.
Gratidão.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ailton, for your very important intervention. I felt very much like you. I never was in such a difficult position as I am now in having to monitor such an important intervention. And I am very thankful that everyone here had this generosity and the need to hear this intervention and the challenges posed by Ailton, including the human rights language and the very structure of this language and how it is inserted in the international system. When we think in a constructive manner, and what kind of response can we provide in terms of an alliance between peoples? Because today we have an alliance between states and capital, and that creates a structure that might talk about democracy and rights and justice, but it actually generates the accumulation of wealth and the marginalization and injustice. We have two international guests who will also participate at this time. Mr. Bruno Maria do Fé from the Secretariat of Integral Human Development. As I said at first, he's not with us, but he sent a message that will be transmitted right now in a video.
Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Yo soy Bruno Marie Dufay, el secretario del Dicastero para el Servicio del Desarrollo Humano Integral en Roma, el Vaticano, Y es una alegría para mí juntar a vosotros para participar unas minutos rápidamente a la reflexión a propósito de los derechos humanos. Yo quisiera proponer 3 puntos de reflexión de atención para introducir o para participar rápidamente, brevemente, a esta reflexión a propósito de la situación de la referencia a los derechos humanos hoy en el contexto local y mundial que tenemos ahora en la situación de la pandemia, pero también con la situación económica y social. Tradicionalmente se dice en la filosofía de los derechos humanos que tenemos 3 generaciones de derechos humanos. La primera generación es la generación de los derechos políticos. Es el efecto, el fruto de las revoluciones políticas, revoluciones de Francia, de América y también de los países después de la colonización y con la lucha contra la colonización. Es decir, que el primer derecho humano es el derecho de ciudadano para participar a la decisión y para participar al debate y a las decisiones. La segunda generación se dice la generación de los derechos humanos sociales. Es particularmente la Declaración Universal de los Derechos Humanos de 1948 que ponen en luz los derechos a la vida, a la comida, a la educación, a la salud. Esos derechos parecen particularmente importantes para desarrollar su humanidad y para desarrollar la vida y la vida social. La condición de esta generación de los derechos humanos es de tener un Estado, una organización social y política que protegen a las personas y que protegen esos derechos humanos. Y la tercera generación se dice desde los años 1990, 2000, la generación de los derechos de las generaciones futuras y particularmente los derechos de los jóvenes y de las generaciones que vienen, de tener una tierra, un ambiente, un mundo pacífico y con una posibilidad de desarrollar sus talentos en este mundo, en este contexto. Eso es muy importante, hacer la relación entre las 3 generaciones y tener esta manera de hablar, de pensar en un debate a propósito de la eficacidad, de la fuerza de esta referencia a los derechos humanos. La segunda
Creio que houve probleminha técnico com o vídeo.
We had some technical difficulties with the video. I don't know if we will be able to watch the rest. Yes, we have a problem here, Fabio. Okay, so we will now invite Christine. And first of all, we will thank the diacons for the deacon for his intervention, Monsignor Dufay, and the direction he was going towards was also working with the broadening of the language. And I believe we do have enough elephant in the room, as can be perceived in what Ailton and and Professor Benilda said, in the systematization of this inequality, and we can bring, and how we can bring different peoples to this language that has been used in a way that supposedly promotes rights, but also to impose an hegemonic view of the truth and of rights. So how do we deal with this reality? And we also have questions here on the chat box that will help us reflect a little bit on that. So right now we will hear from Christine Jange. She is also from the Deacons of Integral Human Development. She is a law graduate from the University of Paris, and she was responsible for the research of international human law and international humanitarian law in the Council for Justice and Peace. Ever since 2014, she's a part of the Directive Community for Human Rights, CDT-HA, as a Santa Fe expert. So Christine, you have the floor. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Hello, dear friends. First of all, let me bring you the prayerful greetings of my boss, Cardinal Peter Turkson, the prefect of the dicastery where I serve, for promoting integral human development. I wish secondly to thank you all for inviting me to participate in this panel. It has been really enriching for me to hear about what Benilda and Alton told me, and it's very difficult, I promise, to respond to such powerful thoughts. So I will do my best, but bearing in mind that my education is in international law, so my perspective will be the one of international law. Anyway, for me, it's very important. It has been a big opportunity to participate in a panel entitled Socio-biodiversity in Asphyxiation, Land, Territories, and Threatened Peoples. Because the title itself is for me, it has been for me a really inspiring one. The first thing I thought to is how precious is our human family when we speak about social biodiversity. A human family which is made of different peoples, each with their own culture, their own traditions, their own history, their own language, and their own spirituality. And it also makes me remember that, on the other hand, that all these differences, besides all these differences, we are all sharing one human nature, one inherent dignity, which does not depend on where we are from or what God we believe to, or what is our language as our tradition, but it belongs to our inherent self, inner self, so our inherent dignity. So for us, for me personally, and for us in the dicastery, being one human family does not mean that we have to be the same. I loved the image of the circle that Belinda recalled, the circle where there is no beginning and no end, we are all the same. And beginning from this image, I wish to propose another image of a polyhedron. The polyhedron, which is different than a sphere because it is made of different facets. And of course, this is not my imagination only, it's that of Pope Francis, who says that our model for development and for sharing the life in our planet should be this polyhedron, because each part keeps its individuality, its difference, but it is together put in harmony in one image. So he says better than me, the polyhedron reflects the convergence of all its parts, each of which preserve its distinctiveness. It is the convergence of peoples who maintain their own individuality. So to preserve different cultures and spiritualities means to preserve the richness of the human family without denying, but indeed valuing the common origin and the common destiny of all peoples of the world. And the Holy See, in fact, values the reflections born of religious traditions that are the repository of centuries of experience and wisdom, and rejects, of course, any form of discrimination and racism based on sex, color, age, social conditions, and so on. And just without giving too many details, but there can be a discussion maybe later, in 2018, our office promoted and organized international conferences about xenophobia and racism in the populist nationalism discourse. And it was interesting to bring together people of different communities to speak how racism is continuing today to make many violences in all parts of the world, unfortunately. And so among our commitments is that to fight racism, both in an individual level, but also at an institutional level, when racism, unfortunately, in Europe is also brought forward by some politicians in a nationalist perspective, unfortunately. So peoples under international law are holders of specific rights. First of all, the right of self-determination, which is the basic right for peoples. And by virtue of this right, they have the freedom to determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. They have the right to freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources, and in no case under international law, they may be deprived of their own means of subsistence. And these are words taken by treaties that have been ratified by most countries in the world in 1966. So imagine how many times ago, but unfortunately, still they need to be applied in the reality. And one of the problems is from the fact that even if the accent in the wording of the text is put on peoples, unfortunately, and not on states, unfortunately, there is not a definition of people in international law. So it is very difficult to advance in this struggle for the recognition of the rights of peoples. Of course, indigenous peoples have their own specific rights that have been sure that everybody knows about, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which recognizes many rights, among which I wanted just to quote the right, just because of the title of the panel, the right to maintain and strengthen their distinctive spiritual relationship with their traditionally owned or otherwise occupied and used lands, territories, waters, and coastal seas and other resources, and to uphold their responsibilities to future generations in this regard. Of course, indigenous people also have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they possess. This is the rights. Then comes the reality. Unfortunately, and we have heard this very clearly from the speeches of Belinda and Alton, these rights that have been solemnly adopted and recognized are well too often contradicted in the reality. How many individuals and peoples all over the world are deprived of their basic human rights? We know and we always repeat again and again that all human rights are inalienable, indivisible, interconnected, and interdependent. And this is not only an abstract idea. We know that violations of economic and social rights, such as rights to food, to water, to decent housing, to decent work, which implies fair wage and all the labor rights, including trade unions' rights, these violations are always accompanied by violence against human rights defenders, by arbitrary detentions, and the worst cases, by enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings that are a reality today. Social inequalities contradict the basic pillar over which international human rights law is built, that is, the recognition of the equal dignity of each and every human being without discrimination, based on race, color, sex, language, religion, political opinion, social origin, and so on. The destruction of the environment is always accompanied by a deracination of peoples that breaks the harmony between the human being and its natural environment, and that leads to many other violations of the very basic human rights. Now, when we proclaim a right, at the same time, we implicitly acknowledge that there are right holders, and in this case, it's individuals and peoples, but there are also duty bearers who have the obligation to respect, to protect, and to promote those rights. Traditionally, under international law, the duty bearers are states, so national states have to respect, protect, and promote human rights. But also other states have the same duty in the exercise of their extraterritorial activities. And I agree with Alton when he says that we have to challenge this model, because in our globalized world, we have to acknowledge that there are other actors, such as transnational corporations, that concur in ensuring the enjoyment of human rights. Some people even argue that such companies might be in some cases still more powerful than states. So that's the reason why we support the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, in which a social corporate responsibility is established, but it's not a binding instrument. Besides these big actors, I wish to recall the importance of a vibrant civil society made of NGOs, unions, faith-based organizations, and other associations. These groups have a special role in awakening consciences and playing the role of human rights watchdogs. And it is particularly important, in my opinion, that such groups work in networks, both locally, nationally, and internationally, in order to be able to better contribute to building fairer societies. And this cooperation has to go beyond natural differences that exist among these groups. And so, for instance, on our side, we always promote the idea to work hand in hand with not only with Catholic-inspired organizations, but also in an ecumenical, interreligious spirit, also with groups of no faith. Because just as human rights are indivisible, interconnected, and interdependent, so peoples on earth too are indivisible, interconnected, and interdependent. In fact, there is no development, at least there is no a truly human development in one country or one region in the world if there is not a human development based on the respect of all human rights in all other countries of the world. That's why we are all concerned with what is happening in another part of the globe. We are all called to turn our eyes and our hearts beyond the frontiers of our countries, to overcome indifference and concretely engage in building bridges of solidarity and brotherhood among persons and peoples, because we are one human family with all our rich differences living in one common and beautiful home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, for this important contribution that you bring to us, and the challenge that we have to reconcile the ideal of this language in the reality of its practice. We have very little time to end the panel. I don't know if I will have any opportunity to get back to you for questions, but I want on behalf of the organizers to thank you for your time, for your important contribution to this conversation. A gente não tem muito tempo, infelizmente, para poder, porque já está.
Unfortunately, we don't have much time, and because we are right in time for the next panel, we are right now divided between reflecting a little bit about the issues that were raised in this panel, and also the need to respect people who are devoting their times to the second panel. So very briefly, I will ask very briefly Mrs. Benilda and Ailton to mention some and to respond to some of the issues that were raised to us. And in the case of Ailton, for example, there's a question about the attempt of FUNAI of creating the indigenous peoples process, and how can the indigenous populations can contribute to the future. And I think that for Benilda, how to break with this idea of identity, an identity agenda and the politics agenda, even even as left, we have to support a model of developing the economy. So if you could respond to that very briefly and reflect upon these topics. The challenge that this panel leaves us is exactly reconciling languages. These were very important speeches from the point of view of the peoples, and it also talks about the perspective of the institution. How can we work with these common languages and the idea of the common home that was raised during our talk? So I would like to invert the order first. Ailton will have the floor and then Benilde. My dearest friends, this panel has this feature of highlighting very important issues that will be able to be worked on later. I'm very honored in this sense. We have a program. This program is open and we will have several forums. And we also have networks in several places so that we can continue these discussions. And these peoples who still have a deep connection to the cosmovisions, there are constellations of cosmos that still haven't become pluriverse. This still hasn't become a collaborative dance, and due to multiple factors, it did not become a communion. But we have this connection, and we will try to do this, most likely not under the rules of the white law and justice, because it has shown to be ineffective. Thank you so much, Ailton. It's such a pleasure to participate, to have you here and listening about what you have to say. Yeah, this is a challenge. I'd like to say that IBASI and UNESCO, historically, also other institutions have showed that Brazil has this pyramid, this social pyramid that is frozen in time. We have white men, then white women, and then black men, and then black women. In the Zero Hunger campaign so many years ago, and now in 2021, we are living the same things. When we thought that we would have advanced in the human rights arena, people don't have time to articulate anymore, to denounce people for crimes against human rights, because people now have to be concerned about what they're going to eat. We have to discuss the economic power, and this has to be a strategy for fighting racism. We need to shift this pyramid. We can't discuss the access to health if we don't mention economy in this discussion. And the Black social movement, the intellectual Black women, there is a lot of production, of written production about this. This is essential, and this is an agenda that we've been discussing. We are doing this in several institutional arenas, and also some private initiatives are doing this, because everybody knows that discussing diversity generates profit, and this also impacts profit. So I really like your what you said, Christine, And Ailton, I wish that we could sing again Tá Caindo Flor, because we need to follow this path together. Thank you so much, Ailton. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to give 1 minute to Christine. Christine, I'd like to address this question to you. The proposal for the international safety net for people and communities, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, indeed. I don't know about this proposal of a safety net, in particular, a proposal about which we are talking. Maybe I couldn't catch about what it is, but of course, I think that human rights defenders as a whole, be they individual activists, journalists, and so on, and then need to have a special, specific protection. In Europe, I can give you the perspective of Europe. We are negotiating within the Council of Europe a declaration to protect all human rights defenders from violence, especially state violence, but also non-state violence, so violence by non-state actors. And I have to admit that it is very sad to see that there are many resistances among state delegates on how to define human rights defenders. Who are these human rights defenders? And there is always the suspicion of some powers that hide behind an NGO and so on. So these are very difficult, tough negotiations. But I think that we have to work on this. Unfortunately, the best way to silence human rights activists is using violence as an example to all the others. And yes, a vibrant civil society is maybe key to exit from this vicious circle.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been, as you know, a very difficult challenge for human rights activists and community leaders, indigenous and Black leaders in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we have hundreds of people killed every year because of their resistance. Mas muito obrigado a vocês, é um privilégio muito grande poder participar dessa mesa.
So thank you so much for your participation in this panel. And now, with no further ado, we will hand the floor to Moema. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Benilda, Ailton. And we have no words to describe the learnings that we have gathered from this discussion. We started the seminar yesterday and we still have tomorrow. This time does not reproduce eternally, so this is a shame. So in this fundamental process of turning the common home into a quilombo, as Ailton said, if we don't build this into a pluriverse, if we don't reconfigure our home, it will not be a common home for everybody. And the Black women are the ones who have been helping us to do that, and the indigenous women have helped us to do this. So now when we're talking about social biodiversity in asphyxia, the first panel that was about human rights and inequalities that were aggravated. When we think about the mandate of the hegemonic people that think they lead everything. And now we will have Professor Luiz Marquis, but we will start with Nara Baré, and then we will have Josiane Gautier as our international guest. We organized this panel so that we have an international guest because we always consider the Brazilian home to be the starting point of this discussion. Nara is the first woman to be the leader of the COIAB, the Association of Indigenous Peoples of the Brazilian Amazon. She is the winner of the German and France Award for Defense of Indigenous Causes. So we will hear Nara for 15 minutes, and we're very happy to have you here. Thank you so much. I would like to greet everybody on behalf of COIAB in this very important moment for our union as social movements, for our union as diverse peoples, and as human beings in this very difficult pandemic moment where our common home is under maximum alert, not only for the indigenous territories, but also all territories in the national level, all of the indigenous peoples in Brazil, in the Amazonian basin, on planet Earth. Mother Earth is crying for help, and we're always mentioning these alerts, these warnings that must be noticed by everybody, and especially in these moment of pandemic that just makes every human being suffer. Throughout our territories, we need to take care of protection and prevention against the COVID-19, but due to the policy of the President of the Republic, our lands are being invaded much more than before. So beyond the Amazon, that's when we have had the greatest rates of deforestation and forest fires in Brazil. So this is not only alerts or warnings. So we're here, very happy to be here, to be contributing, to listen to you. You have contributing so much, you have been contributing so much to this topic. So when we're talking about asphyxia, the territory that is being threatened, this is very timely. We are in constant threat, and the WHO itself talks about what we need to do to contain the virus, and the government is going on the opposite way. So this is not a fiction movie, it's not a horror movie. This is actually a war that we are living, and we are the main characters in this war for our survival. The indigenous peoples have been surviving and their resistance, and we need to do some action, articulated actions, structured actions, together with all of you partners and allies and the civil society, so that we don't have any more losses. For the over 1,000 indigenous people that we lost, over 900 of them are Brazilians. There are children, our youth, our elders, our women, our husbands and parents. They are the ones who are leaving us. There are friends, there are partners. I know that no single person in the world does not know anybody who has lost someone. We are feeling this pressure, but also we are pressuring the state to be responsible and do its job. And we're doing our work with responsibility, with dialogue, and we are denouncing a genocidal government that is omitting, is being negligent, and we don't have any protective measure, no preventive measure for fighting the COVID-19. And we are being denounced by the institution, the agency that is supposed to help us. So who would have told that I would be alive to witness such a history? We, the indigenous peoples, are being denounced by the agency, by the institution that was created to protect us against people who are threatening us, and we are now the criminals. So what are we doing wrong? We are now gathering our strengths. We are pressuring the state. And in the Amazon, if we hadn't done anything, if we didn't have articulated actions integrated with our allies and partner organizations, we wouldn't be successful. We lost our last Juma member, and we didn't need a bomb such as in the dictatorship period. It was not a bomb that was thrown in our territory. It's just something that is being done in front of everybody. So being here, contributing with you, talking about socio-biodiversity and asphyxia is a breath of air to say that this government will not be successful in doing anything that they want to do right now. They haven't been ashamed by the fact that they have been destroying the lives of the indigenous peoples in Brazil just for the sake of increasing capital. Money is just speaking louder than our basic rights, which is the right to life. So the indigenous rights is very important right now. We should not be prejudiced against race or religion right now. And this gives us much more strength, and we need to show you that we are doing the right thing, even though the government is promoting that the vaccine is not effective and not safe. We are doing campaigns saying that the vaccine is important, and we are now fighting every day more, because indigenous, even though even though we're not priority groups, we have thousands of people, and we have one part that is serviced by the indigenous district. So the idea is just that everybody has access to vaccine in a democratic way. The Brazilian peoples, we are several different peoples. So this is not only a moment of reflection, of thinking about what has been happening with everybody, and I would like to thank everybody's effort and the support you have seen that our organization is being victimized through one of the coordinators, Sonia, and our leader was also indicted, called to appear before the federal police. And FUNAI itself is mentioning that it's acting for morality and transparency. Well, and then I wonder if it weren't for morality. So when we're put into this situation, we have 7 grassroots organizations, and we are here to act, to continue acting for the common good of everyone. These offenses, this perjury that we've been suffering, and even though I can't be present forever, I won't be here forever. Other people will continue our legacy. I thank you, Krenak, so much for being here, contributing. And here in the Amazon, we say that we're like bamboo. Everything can come through the bamboo tree will bend but not break. And we are going to go through the storm firmly, but we will never break, because one of the first purposes of COIAB is our unity, and our unity depends on every one of you here, because we can bend but not break. So they cannot intimidate us. We are here, we have been here since forever, and we will continue with our resistance, because before they came, we were here. So these optimism words that is what we want to bring to you. People ask us, aren't you afraid? The government is pressuring you and you're being seen as the villains. And we say, they can say whatever they want, but no one is blind. We can reflect on what is really happening.
So what we bring is our resistance, our speech, and we want to learn from you, be with you, and say, let's take deep breaths, let's love ourselves, so that all of this strength and wisdom of indigenous women and men, our elders, our youth, our children, it goes through generations and it's passed on, and we will get through this together. We will not let this terrible government to pass a tractor over our territories, because we are beyond the roots, we are the territories, we are the resistance, and they shall pass, but we will remain here strong. Thank you very much, and I'm very excited to hear all of you in our second meeting of resistance and existence and fora Bolsonaro.
Muito obrigada. Lindo te ouvir.
And Nara, thank you so much. it's interesting because Nara was not present when Benilda said made her presentation, and the idea of the bamboo that bends but not break, but does not break, was also present, and this idea of resistance, because we are the land, we are not above it, we are made of it. So thank you so much, Nara, and I will give the floor to Professor Luiz Marquis, my great friend and companion. He is a graduate of sociology in the University of Campinas. He has a PhD in arts, and he has published a book that is very much a reference for us, Capitalism and Environmental Collapse. So he comes from the arts, and he helps us understand these great challenges faced by this land that, like our people, is made of bamboo and will bend but not break. So Luiz, you have the floor, 15 minutes. We are very happy to hear from you. Thank you, Moema. Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. I see so many people that are absolutely fundamental for Brazil here together, and I'm very honored to be with you. And right away, I will begin my presentation. Can you see my screen? Yes, Luiz. You can put it full screen, please. Well, I will mention some pieces of data, and I will talk about biodiversity, even though biodiversity and society cannot be separated. And basically, this is the idea. If without the forest, there is no future, there is no future for anyone, for animals. So the forests are the home of 80% of land-based animals and plants, and especially tropical forests. They are the great home of land-based biodiversity. We are going through a sixth mass extinction in the history of the planet. This geological time, where the impacts of globalized economy mold the system and impact the balance of the planet, and over 37,400 species, according to a research by the National Union for Nature, for the Preservation of Nature, are threatened with extinction. And this chart here shows us that there were 37,400,000 species that were threatened with extinction, and 28% of the species evaluated. 36 species were declared extinct in 2020. All sorts of species, plants, animals are completely extinct. And just by way of example, in North America, Canada, United States, and Mexico, approximately 3 billion birds, 29% of the bird populations evaluated in North America, have disappeared. The populations, not the species, the populations have disappeared. 3 billion birds have disappeared ever since the 70s. This is an article that was published in the Science magazine. And this is a study that's fundamental that was just published this year, and it's called Vertebrated Animals on the Brink of Vertebrates on the Brink as Indicators of Biological Annihilation and the Sixth Mass Extinction. And the ongoing sixth mass extinction may be the most serious environmental threat to the persistence of civilization. Thousands of populations have been extinct, and this is being increased in the regions that concentrate the species that are being extinct. Biodiversity collapse are happening, And our results emphasize once again the extreme urgency of global measures. And this is the result of this work. This is a very fundamental work. 515 species, which are 1/4 of the species, have a population with less than 1,000 remaining individuals. And these are species that have up to 250 individuals. All of the species here, including the species of amphibians. This is the average of the vertebrates, and what is in yellow has up to 1,000. What we have in purple is up to 250, and South America is doing worse than all other continents. And look at the geographic distribution of this. The 515 species with less than 1,000 individuals, almost extinct, are in South America and Asia. And the 903 species with less than 5,000 individuals is basically the same. There is a juxtaposition between the species that have less than 5,000 individuals. They will soon have less than 1,000 individuals. So this is a devastating process that is accelerated and is happening extremely quickly. And the Living Planet report shows this, that 68% of the vertebrate populations in the world, out of the 20,000 populations monitored of 392 species, 68% are in decline ever since the 70s. And the regions that were most affected by this decline, we have South America and Latin America and the Caribbean. And especially in freshwater ecosystems, 84% of the populations declined in the freshwater ecosystems. And what's causing these trends, especially the globalized food system? We see the loss and degradation of habitat, overexploitation, pollution, invasive species, and climate change. And the projections point to the annihilation of entire taxonomic groups. In Brazil, in this context, is the most biodiverse country among the 17 most biodiverse countries in the planet. It houses 20% of the biodiversity and has several endemic species. And 5 of these countries are Amazonian countries. Out of these 17 countries, 5 are Amazonian countries. And Brazil has this incredible biodiversity, 83,760 and 54 insects, invertebrates, over 8,000 vertebrates. Look at the great quantity of vertebrates, fish, reptiles, and this is something that we're losing. And we are discovering about 700 species yearly. So it is an almost unextinguishable fountain of life, but we are being able to extinguish it. And 20.8% out of the evaluated species are threatened with extinctions, one of which only exists in the zoo, practically 10 species that have been extinguished. And something is important is the correlation between climate and extinction. And this correlation in South America is the highest, and among which the species being extinguished are bees, And the pollinators are fundamental. Rural crops provide that are pollinized provide food for human life, and over 70% of vitamin A comes from pollinator-mediated crops, and 90% of vitamin C comes from fruit, vegetables, and seeds that are pollinized. And 3/4 of the crops, which means 1/3 of the crops per volume. So this means that we are on the brink of the complete collapse of agriculture. So 3 points of a national and international pact towards life and the preservation of the Amazon. The first point is to defend and learn from traditional forest populations. And here we have a drawing of Sônia Guajajara. Brazil is the most violent country in the world in the number of murders of environmental defenders. 60% of these murders happened in Latin America, and 40% of the victims were members of indigenous groups. And second point, to stop or drastically reduce meat consumption. So let's look at these two maps. This map on the left shows where we have livestock in Brazil. The darker it is, the more livestock. And on the right, the places that are more where the forests are brought down. So there's a juxtaposition there. And so when there is demand, there is an offer. And if we continue eating meat, 80% of the meat sold in Brazil is eaten by us. So João Meirelles has a great article published in 2006. It is a real reference about it. And let's look at the increase. Livestock has increased 10 times in the north of the Amazon. The population of livestock in the Amazon ever since 1985. And 80% of deforestation in the Amazon is due to cattle breeding. And this is domestic consumption. And this down here is exportation, are the exports. And domestic, as you can see, domestic consumption is fundamental. And we are the ones who are clearing the Amazon forest with our diet. And the third point, international boycott of Brazilian commodities from the Cerrado and Amazon biomes. Bolsonaro set the Amazon basin on fire. You can do more than pray for it to stop. Boycott agricultural goods from Brazil. And thank you very much. And I call for the impeachment of Bolsonaro. Thank you, Luiz. Fora Bolsonaro. Once again, we're all of us are Sônia Guajajara. Luiz really complements what Nara had began talking about. Actually, what Rosani started talking about yesterday. These are the defeated people that had already warned us that this democracy was no good and this model was no good. And they had already denounced this and are still the ones who fight and who defend our resources. So thank you, Luiz, also for connecting your presentation to what Renilda talked about. We have the destruction of social biodiversity happening structurally, but we also have individual responsibility. And since we are people of faith, we can do more than just pray. And a part of the seminar is actually believing in that people of faith need to do more than just pray, and they need to do this together with more people and in international relations. And that's why we invite Josiane Gauthier. She will make her intervention, and then we will pray that we have the time, and then we pray, Luiz, we will pray that we have the time to talk more with her. Josiane is longtime companion, and we're very happy to have her with us. She's a lawyer, she's Canadian. She has worked almost her entire life with human rights issue and the defense of children's rights, and is currently the secretary of CIDSEN, which is the coordination of the International Family of Catholic social justice organizations. And to us, it is a great joy to be with you, Josiane, in this seminar where we recognize that the Brazilian tragedy is a threat to the common house, to the common home, and international solidarity is part of our work. So just a question that has been asked in the chat box, everyone is asking where we can find these materials, both the video of Monsignor Dufay and Luiz's material. I believe that Luiz will send us that material, and then we will make it available on the CONIC website. Probably until tomorrow, we will send you the link for this material. So Luiz will send it to us, and tomorrow we will make it available. Josiane, welcome. Thank you, Moema. Thank you for the invitation. I will speak in English. I understood everything. It was wonderful, but I will speak in English and it will be easier for everyone. Great. If you need translation, you just have to click the interpretation button for everyone.
Invitation. It touched my heart to be, and I was quite honored that you asked CIDSE to be present, to participate. And I think a few of us have been trying to listen to the different panels since yesterday, just to learn more, to hear about this great initiative of gathering all these voices together. I think that's the essential element of this gathering, is just to hear as many different voices as possible, and to listen to different voices and to listen to different perspectives with one common dream, with common values and shared value for life, for human life, for biodiversity, for the richness of all we have in this common home. What I heard today, of course, made me think of a lot of things, and there was so much material. So I don't think I will be able to reflect back everything I heard, of course, but I'll try to react and what I collected from it, and what we are trying to do also from our perspective as an international network of solidarity. Obviously, biodiversity is very important and fundamental to us all right now, to save the common home, to heal the common home, which is so very hurt right now and so very wounded. And the biodiversity, as Professor Marquis spoke of, is on the one hand about the biodiversity of the species, but as Nara spoke, it's also the biodiversity of the cultures and of the languages and the knowledge and the wisdom, which is connected to the earth, cannot be torn away from the natural habitat, from the earth, from the territory, but we are extracting it and we are eliminating it at a just as fast a rate as we are the natural elements, the species, the plants and the fauna, the flora. So we are destroying nature and culture simultaneously. And I don't think it's an accident. I think that it's part of, I think Professor Marquis went very fast over it, but he said one of the major causes of the mass extinction is capitalism. And so it's the same logic. It's the same logic that we understand is eliminating people, is eliminating diversity of cultures, is eliminating nature, because it is extracting and using and materializing life into a product. And so when we say that the food systems are destroying the earth and the biodiversity and creating a cycle of destruction and death, we know that it's not the fact that people are eating that is destroying life. It's the fact that food has now become a system, that food is an economic system. It's a commercial system, and it's not about feeding people. It's not really about feeding people. So this is the main sin, in a sense, that we have to fight against. This is where we have to resist. And that's why I thought it was contrasting also that on the one hand, we had very stark and concerning and disconcerting numbers and facts coming from Professor Marquis, and on the other hand, we had such a hopeful, powerful narrative coming from Nara, and that these two can coexist, that we can be in the face of something, a tragedy in a sense, and we can rise, and we can stand, and we can resist, and we can fight. When I saw the title of the panel, Asphyxiation, it made us think about so many things. Obviously, in this time of pandemic, it makes us think about the lack of oxygen and the tragic connectivity between the forests burning and the fact that COVID is taking people's breath away, and that that the healing that we know should exist, we're taking away from ourselves, that we're stealing our only chance at survival and our only connectivity to nature and to each other. That's what we destroy. And yet that's what can save us. That's what can heal this earth, working together and protecting and defending what's precious to us and the people and the planet. Another thing that hit me, of course, when we think of asphyxiation and socio-biodiversity is who's having trouble breathing, who is being asphyxiated. And that's also not accidental. I think the previous panel touched on it, I arrived at the end, but talk about, of course, we think about the pandemic. Of course, we think about how the poor were much more affected, whether it was, especially in wealthy countries, the contrast was amazing, was shocking to see the crossover of racial inequality and the impact of the pandemic. Disadvantaged groups, politically isolated groups in many countries were also highly affected, not accidental, for surely, because it's a system of injustice which compiles on top of itself and creates this asphyxiation. We think, of course, as a Canadian, I think of the examples also in North America. I think of the situation in the native lands of Canada as well, where there was difficult access to clean water, difficult access to medical support, hours of travel for any Indigenous communities who wanted medical support, and also the prohibitive cost of accessing the support. And all of this in an extremely wealthy country and in a relatively rights-based country. So you can only extrapolate and imagine in a country where systems of injustice are actually blindly accepted as being the norm, that you can apply injustice in such a way, racially and culturally. The one thing that I think we need to remember also, there was the example of the trees, of the forest, and there was also the example of the bamboo, and something that struck me, and it reminded me of the root systems in the forests, who they're organized. They're organized. They're organized for collective survival and healing. They're organized for collective defense, and that is the priority. If one tree is ill, the root system will gather and defend and try to heal that tree. And we've read these reports that nature knows how to do this. Therefore, humanity should also be able to do this. It should be in us. We should have that knowledge in us. But are we forgetting? Are we forgetting how to do this? How to heal collectively? How to care for each other? And to take the strength where there is some, and to provide it where somebody has been weakened, or where somebody has been asphyxiated, or where somebody has lost their voice? Can we share that? And the only thing that I think prevents it is that people have become extremely accustomed to their privileges and to their power, and extremely comfortable with that possession of power, so much that they think they deserve it, and that somehow they earned it, and that it's somehow legitimate. And it's not. It's not. It's stolen. It's stolen from your brother. It's stolen from your sister. And this is the conversion that we need. We need to learn how to unlearn that inequality is somehow acceptable, that injustice is somehow the system we live in. It's wrong. It's false, and it can be fixed. And we should know, we have the knowledge within our broader human family. The knowledge exists if we're listening to a diversity of voices, if we're listening to a diversity of wisdoms and knowledge. We have that knowledge within our communities. to learn how to work together again, how to work as a family, and how to overcome this in solidarity, not just with other humans, but also with the biodiversity. So really connecting those two battles together, those two struggles together, and all of that knowledge, which we've lost, which we have considered less of less value because it wasn't of financial value, because it wasn't of commercial trading value. We have lost so much wisdom and knowledge. So how do we reconnect with that? And as an international network, we're trying to bring as many voices as possible together, try to share the space that we occupy as powerful nations, people from privileged countries. We have access that other people don't have access to. So how do we open up those spaces? How do we share those spaces? How do we create space where it needs to happen so that a diversity of voices can reach a place of power and influence change? This is something we're trying to do. This is the process we're trying to work with. And that's why with our friends, at Iglesia Minería, we work very hard to try to find those spaces. We look for them, and then we try to share those spaces together and find a way to hear as many voices as possible. Because right now it's a minority of voices that's speaking and being heard. And that has to change. That has to stop. And the historic relations that we see between the countries that are consuming the most and that have the most power in the decisions, in the political decisions and the economic decisions, it's actually a minority. And the price is being paid by a majority. So there has to be a shift. There has to be a change and a sharing, a different kind of sharing of this space on Earth and of our talents. So, I mean, there's so much more to say. I think just one last thing I think that really struck me in the presentation by Professor Marquis was how all of this extinction and the has happened in such a short time. My lifetime. I look at the dates, I look at the data, and it's since I was born, basically. And that is devastating. The acceleration is what's terrifying. I think we have to really, really act fast. I think this urgency to act has to be felt strongly by as many people as possible. And so that's another thing we can do, is those of us who are maybe not on the front lines can take that and speak out, repeat, give volume, and make known these messages of the urgency. So I think these are some of the things that I heard and that I wanted to sort of share back with you, of things that touched me.
Obrigada, Josiane. Acho que foi uma contribuição super importante, muito sensível.
Thank you, Josiane. Your contribution was really sensitive and connected to what we've been sharing here. We have 2 or 3 questions and a little bit of time, and then I will give 5 minutes to Nara and Luiz. I would like to thank your contributions so much. And questions about agribusiness will come up, and this is very timely. And this issue about the lack of biodiversity and hunger in a country where agribusiness has all the support, how can we connect, how is agribusiness connected to extinction of species and hunger? So this is a very important issue. So Luiz, no, this was already asked. Another question was, between hunger and the lack of biodiversity, we have an increase in violence, and I think that Nara could contribute in the sense about how this takes place. There is another important question, which is Brazil, with its criminal and genocidal government, is venerated by several religious leaders. They get indignant with homosexual kisses, but not with the lack of use of masks. Why do capitalists have the power to destroy everything? And there's a last question.
Então a gente vai passar para vocês três para essas últimas questões.
And now I will hand the floor to the three of you. Agribusiness, how it connects to the increase of hunger, and this issue with the increase of systematic and systemic violence. So now we will start with Nara, and then Luiz, and then Josiane. So 5-7 minutes to each one, and then we will finish in the right time. Okay, I will try to say something in 5 minutes. Especially considering the situation that we have today, the advance of the agribusiness in the national territory, especially in the period where this horrible government tries to legalize what is illegal. We have lots of conflict because our governments, the House representatives and the Senate, we are the ones who elect them. And what we see is a threat that agribusiness itself, who is it for? We are not benefited by agribusiness. The year before last year, we had a campaign that mentioned this. Whatever is harvested here is exported to Europe or becomes animal food outside of Brazil. So this generates another issue. We have a lot of people in hunger who are hungry nowadays everywhere. When we say inside of our emergency action plan in the fight against COVID-19, and we have seen some results because the government doesn't have a single plan, a contingency plan for that. There is no single measure for that. And in our traditional way of life, people say, oh, the indigenous people, they live from the land. It's different because we have a moment to plant and a moment to harvest. We weren't prepared for the pandemic, and we have been living in the situation for over a year. So agribusiness that uses fertilizers and all of this has a big effect on us. And when people say that we ourselves are burning the forest, we say very highly in our place. We know that this is a moment when they are trying to legalize what is illegal in Brazil. And everybody is thinking about capitalism and profit, and it's not for us. So the family agriculture and the indigenous peoples, when people say that we should open production and do that in large scale, when we need to scale up production, this is not the talk that we need to have. And what is being done in some places, for example, in Roraima, you have pastures, native pastures. Nothing was deforested in order to open that space. It's different from when you deforest a forest or a cerrado vegetation or pampas so that you can plant soy or anything in the likes. So we need to review this part of agribusiness. We know that whatever is produced is exported, and the food that goes to the tables of peoples, of families, is what is being produced by family agriculture. And we've been doing a very intense work connected with our partners, some of the churches, it's not all of them. And we are working together with them to see how we can minimize this impact. And I mentioned now the city of Manaus. We're still in a hybrid system. As you see, I have a short hair right now because I did that mourning my father who died. And we're here in the trenches. We're just basically working nonstop. We are talking about our relatives. We're talking about our lives. I was infected by COVID-19 and I almost lost my husband. He resisted the virus, but we still have some consequences in our pancreas, in our kidneys. We need to talk about the consequences of COVID-19. We are living these consequences right now, and these consequences are not only for the ones who were infected. My partner, my greatest comrade, she has had lots of consequences, emotional impacts in her life. So we need to talk about this. So this also involves a lot of the psychology of talking to women who lost their kids, their husbands, who were the person who were the ones who put the food on their tables. So they would help them the in the field. So it's really important for the government to make sure that the sanitation infrastructure, that it's not a structure, it's our common home. Each people need to have this idea of bringing the correct kind of information to people. And we are trans-border peoples. We have the triple border. We have Venezuela, Brazil, and Colombia. So this is the Baré territory. Some people say that we are neighbors to many other peoples here around here. So it's a lot of things to discuss. I am at your disposal if you would like to talk. But we need to think about the perspectives of what we have and the challenge that we have when we talk about a common home, vaccination. I'd like to count on your support. When people ask me what can the church do, when people say the indigenous pastors, when they tell the indigenous pastors not to get vaccinated, it's not all of the pastors who don't get vaccinated or who tell people not to get vaccinated. So when they say that they won't ask people to get vaccinated, I say that we, independently from religion, we have the obligation of bringing people the correct information. All people need the correct information. And then they should choose if they want to get a vaccine or not. The hashtag that we started, vaccinate your relative, is very important because of that. When people say that we're going to become alligators and other crazy things like that, this is something that is a responsibility of everyone. So it's a great challenge that we have. And we need to make a video to encourage people to decide based on correct information. I have a lot to talk about. I'm sorry if I went over my time. Thank you so much for your contribution, Nara. We definitely need to encourage everyone to get vaccinated. And this morning will be the start of our healing process. This pandemic will not just end when the virus ends. We still need to deal with its consequences after that. So as we have a mythical type of time, we will extend just a little bit to listen to Luiz. Well, Nara basically said everything that I wanted, and I basically endorse everything that she says. I'd just like to say a word or two. In Brazil, we have a very clear opposition. On one hand, we have agribusiness, and on the other, you have MST. So this is what defines our struggle. We have to work hard to understand there is a very brutal piece of information. In 1990, we had 0.88, that is 880 grams of fertilizers per hectare. And 2017, almost 6 kilos. So we increased the use of these pesticides because it's not because I have increased the area, but it's just an increase in use. So what we have to do to preserve our health, to preserve water life, the biodiversity, the pollinizers, what we need to do is we need to stop eating things that come from this killer kind of business, which is agribusiness. So we need to start consuming products produced by MST, not only them, but organic products, local food products. There's no reason for buying things that come from a faraway place. So for me, this is the fundamental message that needs to be transmitted. And I thank you all for listening. I'd like to thank so much Mr. João Pedro Stedley. I admire him very much. So we're all together in this, as we have seen here in the chat, not only in the Amazon, in the south we have seen forests being destroyed and bees being killed by the amount of poison that is being used. There is no limit or border that will prevent the poison to reach these other regions. So the Sem Terra movement and the indigenous peoples are essential for that. And even other communities that were here defending the land and creating and recreating even before people came here. Now, Josiane, you have 2 minutes.
Because the others already spoke about these things, the consumption production patterns are really a problem. It's about overconsumption. It's about transportation. It's about the pollution of the food system, the travel, but also as Professor Marquis mentioned, the pollutants, the toxic elements. We produce all of this food, and how much of it is actually food, is actually nourishing food that's feeding people. And that's why there's hunger, and that's why there's malnutrition, and that's why there's poor nutrition, people eating massive quantities of not nourishing food, not a diversity of foods that don't grow naturally where they're from. People have lost all relationship with food. It's completely a disconnected process, the food that they're consuming. And so it's a dehumanizing experience, and it should be the opposite. It should be connecting us. There's also the huge element of the control of the food system. There's no democracy in the food system. It's quite controlled by private interests. And this is also a problem for people's food sovereignty, the right to feed themselves in the most appropriate manner with the food that grows in the seasonality of their area. And so that's why it's so important to have access to the other methods, the alternative methods that exist, that are actually the natural methods of producing food and consuming in a sufficient way so that we can survive and thrive and be healthy. So we've got to break our addiction to an unhealthy and murderous food system, which is unfair and which is actually which is being used in the same way that all of the other systems of colonization are being used, to exploit some for the benefit of a few.
Obrigada, Josiane, com essas falas potentes, super conectadas de diferentes lugares.
Thank you so much for your powerful contribution. This is a language that can gather us, integrating our diversity into this pluriverse that will save Earth and everybody else. And we have now reached the end of our second day. We thank the first panel and now the second panel with Nara, Luiz, and Josiane. We are deeply thankful for the diversity of the voices that we heard here today. And we'd like to extend our deep thank you for our interpreters who were here yesterday and today with us, Tatiane and Natalia. Thank you so much, because you're helping us to sew together the fabric of life so that we can continue living. We will now say goodbye and inviting you to come tomorrow. Tomorrow is a very important day as well. It's the day when we're going to have this first panel about pandemic and sanitation crisis in Brazil. And we will have a very important moment, as it was explained at the opening. All of this entire seminar is for coming up with solutions. The seminar is not only for the ones who pray, but also those who build alternatives for life. So everybody listen to all of the panels with attempts to build alternatives, to build alternative solutions for everybody, vaccines for everybody, and fora Bolsonaro. Let's continue with faith. What they want us to do is to think that we're going to give up. Fora Bolsonaro. Thank you so much.